So you want to transform your customer experience? I think you should start with your employees. As companies evolve their customer experience strategies, the workforce often bears the brunt of change. The challenge? Balancing innovation with employee empowerment. From retail shelves to hospital halls, from bank tellers to hotel concierge, frontline staff are the face of your brand. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Smart CX leaders know the real magic happens below the surface. It's about empowering every employee, from IT wizards to logistics gurus. Everyone contributes to the customer experience. If only it were that simple. I mean, how do we innovate without overwhelming our teams? Can employee satisfaction truly drive business success? Our latest customer experience priorities research explores the full depth of these challenges and more. Today, we're diving into Priority 4, Empower Employees as Customer Experience Champions. Expanding on last year's research, we're challenging leaders to dissolve the boundary between employee experience, EX, and their CX strategy. Like an iceberg, these two elements are part of the same whole, inseparable above and below the surface. By understanding CX's impact on employees, you're not just improving service, you're transforming your entire business ecosystem. But how do you actually implement this in the real world? What measurable benefits can you expect to see? Well, to answer these questions and more, we're joined by Morgan Laville, a customer experience expert with a focus on contact centers and a veteran of our research series. She is joined by Brencis Stanford, a digital advisor bridging the gap between technology and business outcomes. Together, they'll guide us through practical steps and success metrics for empowering your employees as CX champions. My name is Rob Boyd. Welcome to Worldwide Technology Presents Research, with insights powered by the Advanced Technology Center.
WWT presents Research.
Well, welcome to Worldwide Technology Research. Morgan, we've done this before, but it's been a while. Let's start with introductions, and we'll start with you. What do you do these days? How do you describe your role as it relates to today's topic?
Hey, Rob, good to see you again. Again, Morgan Laville. I'm a business development manager sitting in our customer experience practice, focusing on contact center and CPaaS.
And Brencis, I assume you do something similar. I've got your title down as a digital advisor. You've been at Worldwide for a couple of years. What do you do for Worldwide?
Like Morgan, right? It boils down to digital experiences through the lens of customer and employee experience, right? So how do we provide those experiences, those transformations, whether it's AI, whether it's your typical marketing tools, or anything that Worldwide provides as a service? So that's primarily how I support our customers and our internal sales teams.
Excellent. And you have some background in this area as well, correct? Prior to Worldwide, you've worked with some big companies. You've worked with a lot of developers. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I spent about 10 years at Wells Fargo, specifically working in their software development team, where I was really responsible for managing some of the SDLC tools. So thinking like your large tool sets. And yeah, there was quite a few developers at one point, about 20K plus user base. So yeah, fun stuff.
Well, Morgan, let's start with you. I'm just kind of curious, why now? What is it? Why is it important to be focused on CX? And then we'll get into more of how the employee experience can affects that.
I think for years now, everyone's been saying the technology landscape has been evolving rapidly. And I think year over year and month over month, every day, we're beating each other from what we were doing yesterday. The landscape is changing, not only from a technology perspective, but also customer expectation. So there's this old adage of, even though you're not in the pizza industry, you're competing with Domino's, right? Understanding, where your order is, what stage is it in, what are the names of the employees who are supporting you with that order, right? Even though you're not in that industry, you are competing with that context and that personalization across the employee and experience journey. So the landscape is changing, not over from customer experience, but also the tools that deliver that customer experience. And then AI is the name of the game. I don't think I've ever thought that my communication with my family around what I do for work would change from, Morgan works for the internet. And then what is AI?
I love that. I think we all have those examples when we work in technology where we're just used to being amongst everybody who's kind of living at whatever breakneck speed and thing that we're all doing at all times. And there's nothing like family to kind of bring you back down to earth and say, Can you explain this to me? When it comes to this focus on CX, I'm kind of curious, just to make sure we understand what kind of benefits accrue to an organization.
To me, there's three main areas that we're seeing, to Morgan's point, that are becoming increasingly, valuable to these organizations from a CX perspective, right? And that's thinking about how you're creating new streams of revenue, personalized experiences that, up until this point, with the advances of AI, have honestly just been kind of a North Star, if you will, of places that we want to reach to. Um, Also, the ability to potentially do more with less, right?
Yeah.
So, taking what you do have and, maximizing it to its utmost potential, right? So whether that's your cloud spend, or whether that's security, or whether that's something as simple as tapping into, hey, how do I find this document in a company of 10,000 plus people without asking, 20 people, and it taking half the day, right? So when you do those things and do them very well, you see and I think we're going to get into it, right? The inverse of not only how it elevates the experience that the customer will have, it differentiates them, your company as well, to say, hey, we have this really seamless, hyper focused customer journey / experience that it just works, right? And, as a customer, you want that type of experience where it just works and you don't have to think about it.
We're really talking about, with this particular priority for this year, is really how can we use the employee experience to drive improvements in the customer experience. And that seems to me like a really obvious thing. Happy employees are going to interact with hopefully customers that would be on balance happier with the brand, and perhaps reward them with some loyalty. A lot of times an enterprise organization is having to face up to expectations set by our experience with smaller consumer companies who don't have the legacy data to deal with, and systems, and all the different ways in which they may have different relationships with their customer base. What kind of challenges are keeping us from easily reaching the kind of the customer experience goals that we may be setting for ourselves? What gets in the way?
I think having a strategy around data to understand, what do you do next, right? Who you're interacting with, right? That leads into omnichannel experiences, omnichannel strategy, but also understanding, you know, how do you interact with that customer or that employee, or how do you handle that data? How does that employee handle that data to appropriately respond to the customer request? How do you track down data for your day-to-day job, right? Having a data strategy and have access to those tools and that insight to understand what do you do next, what's the next best action is key. But also understanding, what is that trickle down effect to when you invest in your customer experience? How does that affect your internal organizations and your employee experience? A lot of times people have blinders on and be like, cash cow, right? Customers bring in revenue. Understandably so, you want to invest in that.
Yeah.
But also your employees are your lifeblood of your organization. So if you don't invest in them as well, and they recognize that, it's not a jealousy thing. It's a requirement thing that you have to invest in them as well. So, just in the news this week around hotel strikes, not investing in what you need to for your employees to deliver that ultimate employee or customer experience on the back end and supporting your organization. So removing those blinders, having an open mindset, I think is key. And it's a way to address those challenges that you experience both internally and externally.
Yeah, one of the big things I want to get into here is some of the action steps that were called out as far as how do you proceed forth in a logical manner. But I want to make sure I understand, because when you're talking about focusing on customer experience, the employee experience, to make sure that it's driving a good customer experience, are we only talking about, because I know you work with contact center a lot, and we traditionally think about that as being, this is our primary interface, so it makes sense we pour resources and metrics and everything around that, because we can measure really well interaction times and different things like this, theoretically. I guess sometimes it's still very, very challenging. But are you talking about employees that aren't necessarily interacting directly with customers as well? Is there a benefit to focusing on the entire organization, even what we might consider back of the house?
Contact center does impact a lot of different teams. So if you relay the same principles that we leverage in the contact center, so WFM, WAM, workforce management, right? Scheduling a contact center agent. extending that into your employee experience across the organization, staffing appropriately to support your customers.
I think that contact center is just the one that traditionally people kind of go to when you think about customer experience,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the contact customer experience, point
That's
of
logical.
view, right? So thinking about everything from your development teams, from your marketing, from your security, it all has an impact, to what they're trying to create internally that goes to, eventually to the customer, right? So whatever
Okay.
that output is, right? And I think a great, visualization of that is, WWT's journey with AI. What we decided to do as a company was to say, hey, we see that this is on the horizon, and we want to make sure that we ourselves test it out internally as our internal users and internal customer base before we can have a opinion about this, or put this out in front of our customers, or to talk to others about it. So we went through that model of saying, hey, internal employees, test it out. It's going to
Yeah.
solve some of the headaches that we have internally, but also potentially lead to opportunities to engage other customers externally, right? The client facing. So it's that that path of journey that goes all the way through.
And there's no role internally to an organization that is too small or too indirect that does not impact the customer outcome, right? At the end of the day, that business is up and running to deliver upon that customer. Again, capturing revenue, but delivering for their customer base, right? They're in business to do business. So all the roles that support that are to that end, right? So there's even as far as indirect, as far away from contact center as you can be, you're still in support of that customer journey and all those employees that deliver upon that.
Yeah, you both are using the word journey a lot, and nothing wrong with that, because I think you guys have journey tools and you do journey mapping, if I understand correctly. Could one of you kind of walk me through what does that mean? Because I feel like that's part of the process for maybe isolating and making sure. Do you understand how your role, perhaps tangentially, but how it affects the outcome that we're all driving for? Does that stuff get physically mapped in these situations when you're trying to understand where we can improve things?
I think that it's the journey mapping, but also the personas that you're mapping to that specific journey, right? So take a fast food company, for instance, and maybe they're wanting to increase sales, at a specific percentage, for whatever reason it is. So what traditionally Worldwide would do is to take a look at whatever those specific goals are, and see, thinking about the outcome that you're trying to achieve, what's take a whole step through that journey, from the people in the back who are preparing the food to the ordering of the food, whatever that process looks, look at it each step of the way and map it out so that you can understand that, hey, for drive through, this is the specific persona and journey that we can take to increase revenue. If somebody's coming into the restaurant, this is the specific persona and journey that we can take to achieve that goal, and so on and so forth. So it's very intentional, that you're looking at not only the actual journey that you're trying to to achieve, but also the specific persona. To Morgan's point, right? Everyone has a purpose, and is going to be leading to something to help that consumer directly or indirectly.
And so are we talking, do many organizations, I don't know how common this is, have a CX journey and an EX journey, and they're two different things, or is there tend to be a focus on one and they didn't even think about doing one for the other?
I think it's the latter, right? I think it's really easy to revert into focus on the customer experience because you're the top of mind notion is that tracking how a customer is interacting with you, right? Where are the points of friction? Because the amount of points of friction that there are, or understanding, where there's areas for investment, that is to capture that and retain that business, right? But for every customer experience, there is the equal employee experience that needs to be accounted for. So I think as far as how frequently do people do employee experience journey mapping, not as frequently as customer experience, but it's equally as important. And those are things that we're bringing to our customers, or at least approaching to our customers more so today than before, because of the tools that are there to deliver those customer experiences, but also the changes of any impact you have on your customer experience journey. There's an equal change on the other side, right? That's two sides of the same coin. But to your point, yes, they do get physically mapped out, and oftentimes through those journey mapping exercises, even through customer experience journey mapping exercises, there are flows and personas that customers aren't aware of yet, or don't know that they need to finalize, or that need to fine tune or optimize, and then even more so on the employee experience side as well.
There are 4 action steps called out for kind of putting this into motion. And I think they provide kind of a good anchor. The first action step is to find your EX leader, and that assumes there is one, and partner with them for your customer experience journey that you're working on. Can you guys speak to why is that important, and how does that begin to help kind of remove obstacles here?
A lot of these that I would say traditional EX/CX opportunities, especially the employee side, reaching out to the directors or heads of HR, right? Because they are focused on, hey, what is the employee experience? That is part of their role. So I think, like you said, right, not every organization might have a head of EX, but somebody has that as a responsibility. And, once you're able to really get the buy-in and, obviously show and speak the same language that the business cares about, the technology necessarily it should follow, right? So it's that same path that we already just talked about, right? You can't have the best seamless experience at a Panera if you don't think about the CS and EX, right? And you can't have the same success with implementing them or getting these things off the ground, these big transformational projects off the ground, if you don't have those leaders from the business and technology in lockstep as well.
How uncommon is that, Morgan, for you to find customers that don't know of the other's existence or aren't partnering in some way? Is that?
I mean, it's pretty frequent. I would say. I think it's a similar theme across just organizations in general, knowing other teams to collaborate with. So, for example, whenever we're doing customer experience transformation, contact center transformation, we always throw up our maturity curve on the screen and say, this is an area for us to get everyone who has a voice in the room and have an equal voice, right? Share what they want to do and share what they can do based off what they have today, and where do they need to go, and work backwards into that investment strategy and that roadmap, identifying what lines of business need to be involved, as well as IT, is already a challenging point at some customers. Whenever you take that to the next level and talk about employee experience, right? A lot of times whenever you're working with lines of business and IT for contact center investments, you're running into IT saying we can't do that because we haven't upgraded the system, or we don't have those tools in place today. If you kind of bring that same parallel mindset to or working model to a customer experience and employee experience teams working together, you can almost preemptively identify areas of like where they want to invest in customer experience optimization. And on the back end, employee experience teams can be like, that's not going to work. We don't have that process in place. We don't have the tools in place to deliver that. And it's bringing that same mind share and open conversation to those two teams, like we do with the contact center investments teams as well. Less likely that we will have those teams to work with, but it's an area that customers are investing in and hiring for.
But I like the fact, because I'm very familiar with the IT example of people doing all this preparation to roll something big out that's important for the company. It's got all these people involved, and it's not until very late in the process, perhaps, when certain things that you think would have come up more in kind of the critical what needs to happen process, to find out, oh, we don't have any more room in our data center, or we don't have the tools to measure to give you the data that you want or something. And so I don't think that's uncommon. And it's some of it's a factor of just how fast we're all kind of moving, and it's hard to slow down. And do you have that culture that says, yeah, my fellow employees are not going to be annoyed when I come in and ask for their contribution to an ongoing team, perhaps, or something like that?
I think the mindset of investing in employees and showing that you have an EX team, an EX department, is a newer thing, like we've been saying this whole time, more so after
Yeah.
COVID. I think people are asking for a voice and asking for their voices to be heard internally, and have an advocate for that within the organization. So it's definitely a shift, but it's something that I think organizations are being more pragmatic about, and showing that there's been heartburn before from investing in tools and kind of throwing things together. And now, as an organizational market shift, there's been more investment, there's been more insight into, and more being more pragmatic around those investments and what those tools bring to those organizations.
Well, I think that's a good distinction, because like Brennis mentioned HR, does it tend to fall to HR, and is that a good thing or a bad thing, or what's important to understand there?
It's just a mixed bag, right,
Yeah.
Rob? A year ago, we didn't have, a head of AI or director of AI. Now you're seeing those type of roles kind of become more prevalent, right?
Yeah.
And I think that to Morgan's point earlier, you're starting to see that companies are paying more attention to it, right? They're starting to hire specific roles for that. So those general functions of HR kind of maybe, in some instances, they have that control and they have that mandate. One specific I'm thinking about, theirs was to say, hey, we're trying to create this very unique employee experience for our new campus. We want, people to use this app, and, we want to be an amazing experience for our employees. And this was an HR led, initiative,
Yeah.
with technology kind of falling in line. But I think that, to your point, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. And it could be an indication of maybe how it's treated or taken. What's funny is all of my favorite HR people, and I think back through my career, would be all over this, though, because I think having the chance to not just think about keeping things out of trouble, but also thinking about just really how can I maximize someone's joy and how much they feel like they're able to contribute in the part that they play. I think most people are drawn to those positions because that's truly what we envision, being something useful that we want to be able to empower.
When you're able to use technology to increase the experience to something that somebody actually loves or wants to do, you can also introduce securities and parameters and processes into that so that it's seamless as well, right? So you're getting the core function of what HR is, kind of tasked to do, but also, it's a pretty cool experience behind the scenes as well.
But then number 3 is, how can you improve the experience by removing friction? Is that part of the job of mapping these journeys, is to really say, how do these things feed each other, and what are the data inputs, and where does stuff come out and how it's used, to kind of eliminate, there's a big stopgap here that could really throw us off?
Yeah, I think a key part is understanding where the points of friction are, which will come from that journey mapping exercise, right?
Okay.
And then when you find that points of friction, so say that the average handle time for a customer is just it's extremely costly. It's driving customers to not get the resolution that they need, or they hang up, or they have a low sentiment after their calls are handled, or their requests are handled. How can you improve that interaction, right? How can you upskill your employee to improve that interaction? And that's measurable, right? I think we referenced, how can you monitor and how can you measure the investments? So say that once you get to through some point of digital deflection or customer self-service, their answers aren't being met or provided, right? So they get escalated to an agent. How can you upskill that agent to reduce that customer time on the call? And that translates to, agent assist, live agent coaching, and tools that will enable that agent to reduce the amount of time that they're on the call with customer and increase the time to resolution, ultimately allowing that customer to, one, have a positive experience, and 2, upskilling that agent to do a better job at their current role. That can be used to upskill a new agent, right? So that they seem like they're more tenured and they don't get frustrated, and reduce the amount of agent turnover. Again, my blinders are up for contact center, but that can also extend into other tools and systems across the employee journey.
How do you prioritize in terms of what you look at, knowing where I am, so I know, are there some other journeys that we want to pursue, and how do we go about doing that? And so we first want to understand where we are to do that. And then they get into some level of prioritization, saying, this is, we'd like to do this, but it requires this much investment and this type of thing. Is that part of the mapping exercise?
It is part of the engagement, right? You understand what the journeys are. You identify what your priorities are, also through those engagements with the line of business, and you map back pragmatically through that weighted need, right?
Okay.
Where are those lines of business and those stakeholders care about and desires ranked internally, and how do you map back against that, and also giving an estimated timeline for each projected project, right, to map back into those priorities. So it's definitely a balance of communication or investment or just inspection from that customer engagement to identify where do you start. But ultimately, the customer requirements or the business requirements are going to determine what you start with first.
Do we have an issue with people thinking, oh, anything could be done with technology, and you have to kind of bring them down to earth and say, look, this is how this is going to work now, or it needs to work and be thought about?
Yeah, no, I think that's fairly accurate, right? The spectrum depends on what's the solution you're trying to bring to light, right?
Yeah.
AI is the perfect one because, you can do everything with it. It's the magic,
Seems that way, right? Yeah.
it's the magic pill, so, um, and I think that what Morgan was saying about the journey mapping and finding the friction points and ultimately, what's the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve? What's the budget that you have and are willing to, spend to achieve those outcomes? Ultimately, that will kind of help you narrow down, well, is this new technology the way to go to solve this problem? Or maybe it's just a refinement or, cleaning up of what we already have,
Yeah.
right? So I think that journey mapping exercise can kind of help frame it in either one of those ways.
In action step number 4, just working through our list here, we talk about aligning the metrics in these things. So this is following on from mapping the journeys, comparing the journeys, and having these relationships to be able to do this. But I'm curious, Morgan, in terms of the metrics that are being used to define success in this area, what are the KPIs maybe that you're starting to see more interest in and provide more value to the business these days?
Yeah, so I mean, when you're thinking about customer experience, the callback rate is one, but NPS is the big one, right? And then there's an equal score for employee NPS or Net Promoter Score as well. So again, two sides of the same coin. If one is thriving, one's failing, how fruitful is that organization? If you have people who are internal evangelists or people who are brand ambassadors internally to you, then that's great. But if you have people who are deterrent to you because they go publicly and say that you're not providing what you need for your employees, that is also something that from an external factor, external optics is not ideal for a brand. Investing in the customers, investing in the employees, but also having that kind of confirmation through those ratings will allow you to know if you're on the right track for both sides.
How hard is it to align these things?
I think it takes a broader measuring effort to understand, what that brand or what that business does. So, for example, say that you're a top tier airline, right? But you have a scheduling conflict where your flight attendants and your pilots don't know where to go, and your planes are grounded, right? That is an employee experience issue that directly relates to your customer experience. That is something like antiquated systems or systems that don't allow you to do your job that can publicly relay a negative customer experience, but it's really a negative employee experience. So when you hear about airlines and all the crews who are aligning to strike, right? That might not be a technology thing, but that's that same investment, that same care about monitoring your employee experience and measuring that internally to understand where are the points of friction internally, what are your employees telling you about their experience working with you and working for you. And identifying that through those surveys will tell you where you need to invest with that employee experience before it impacts your customer experience.
You're probably helping people build dashboards, I would think, to kind of keep their finger on the pulse of these things. Is that a realistic way to think about where it could go? So that as business leaders, you have something to look at to know if we're trending in the right direction, and you can immediately identify, say, those points of friction and get on top of them, at that root cause. Is that reasonable to expect?
I know that his team is doing a lot of exciting stuff with data analytics. So, for example, where our cross-functionality across customer experience and digital, or we're the same pillar, I'm sorry, but across that CX and EX intersection, right? identifying, for example, in utility companies, they get metrics as far as how are they Gallup polls, JD Power reports. All those surveys are taking in customer data, customer reports, and customer survey input to give that back to those utility companies to see how are they performing across their entire customer experience. Right.
Wow.
All these utility companies get the same reports, and then they have to manually sift through that report to see what areas of investment there are for employee experience or customer experience. But through our data analytics teams, we are thinking through ways that how can we take all those manual reports and give a custom dashboard to those utility companies to understand where across our entire ecosystem, across systems and infrastructure to invest to that are mapping back to those customer inputs or customer output or data sets, right? And how does that map back into a technology landscape and also an internal investment roadmap to one, ultimately increase that customer experience survey and rating, but how does that impact your employee experience? That is measurable through data analytics.
If there's data, we can visualize it, right? So there's long before it was hey, let me just know what's there. What does the data even say? What does it look like? What's just the dashboard? But to take it a step further, now it's taking action on that, right? So being more predictive on that actual data. Once you get it, from that source, clean it up, it's in the dashboard. You can see what's happening. To your point, Rob, it's becoming more so of now, what tools, technologies do you have in place that can automatically start seeing those trends and then take action to, whatever that might be, whether it's saying that, hey, development hours are going up when, we put in place these tools and these processes to help things trend downward. Red flags, we're going to actually, automate some of, these processes, or maybe this way of requesting access is causing them to, maybe have to work longer and harder than it should, right? And it's affecting the actual employee experience. So you're starting to get to the age now where we're leveraging the actual data to be more not reactive, but more proactive, and actually provide not just insight, but actual intelligence that can actually do something about it.
What kind of resources do you guys provide? What kind of organized assistance might you provide?
Yeah, every customer is different and unique. So we have flashy landing pages on our website that ultimately lead you to an engagement with our services teams and our practices that will have that tailored conversation with you of like, where are you today? What if you have these questions, if you're coming to us, then you must have these preconceived questions already in your mind of how can I invest in this space, or how can I optimize what we're doing today. Just engaging with our team, we have resources who are readily available to talk through, what are we doing today across different customers, different verticals, because every vertical is unique, every customer is unique, but a lot of the trends are the same, and the issues that we're solving for are the same. And we bring a lot of our contextual and historical value and experience to all of our customers, no matter how big or small, right? So we can have a custom tailored assessment for your employee and customer experience, and bring that intersectionality and that combined, value output of like, this is where you are with your customer experience and your employee experience, and then how does this map back to your brand experience? It can be as tailored or as broad as you need it to be. And then a lot of those assessments can give you deliverables that are actionable and reportable back to your business to get further investment, to
Nice.
show that this is the value we'll get through making these investments and spending this time on these engagements.
What's important to remember from this conversation, because it could feel like an overwhelming thing to tackle, and I just wonder if you have any advice for someone looking to embark on something that can feel a bit overwhelming.
I think ultimately what I would leave somebody with is, hoping that they would take from this conversation is that to have that world-class experience for your customers, you have to think about your employees. To have that world-class, product that you're trying to sell, whether it's a product or a service, right? You have to keep that in mind, right? And you have to really do the due diligence, the work to say, hey, we're not going to think about what the profits, the results, or the usage is from this customer-facing thing, but we want to make sure that we're looking at it holistically to understand how it affects our internal teams as well as our customers. And when you start thinking holistic, you start driving those business outcomes that ultimately everybody wants to achieve.
Yeah, very well said. No, I like that. As we wrap things up here, what would you want us to leave with so we don't miss any key points?
Yeah, I would say for every customer investment you make, there should be an equal employee experience investment that you should make, or consideration that you should make, right? Whenever you invest in your customer experience, it's really easy to see the direct outward value for that. But whenever you invest in your employee experience, not only do your customers realize that and they recognize and respect that, but your employees will also appreciate that and respect that as well.
What I hear you guys saying here is that not only can you measure it, and not only can you address it in a business-like fashion, which means that it has to, that these investments in time, people, resources can be quantified to the extent that you make decisions about, is this good for us or not? Because that's really where it has to be to survive inside of a business. And you guys are saying, yes, it can be done. Here are some ways in which we can go about doing it, because these two are obviously linked.
Your investment in this space to not only improve your customer experience, but your employee experience, that's a trickle-down effect for our mission, our values. Worldwide is truly keen and truly aligned to delivering the best experiences across the entire system spectrum, and that no one is short sold on that. Right, everyone is being taken into consideration for that. So,
Brencis, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rob. Good being here.
Absolutely. Morgan, thank you as well.
Thank you, Rob. Hopefully I didn't scare you away.
Not at all. CX improvements often burden employees with new technologies and processes. But as we've explored today, integrating employee experience into CX planning creates more seamless workflows and ultimately boosts customer loyalty. It's this holistic approach which is crucial for organizations aiming to excel in today's competitive landscape. If you found this discussion interesting, I highly recommend checking out the previously recorded episode featuring Dave Watts and Andrew Bryden. They explore Priority 1 of the same customer experience report, focusing on taking control of your digital destiny through a full stack approach to CX. It's an excellent complement to what we've covered today, offering a broader perspective on the CX landscape. Well, as we've seen, the relationship between employee experience and customer experience is intricate and powerful. By investing in your employees and aligning their goals with your CX objectives, you can create a virtuous cycle that benefits everyone, your staff, your customers, and ultimately your bottom line. I encourage you to dive into the full Customer Experience Priorities Research Report. It is packed with actionable insights and strategies that can help you navigate the complexities of modern CX and EX. Remember, in today's competitive landscape, exceptional customer experiences aren't just a nice to have, they're essential for growth and success. And as we've learned today, your employees are the key to unlocking that potential. Thanks for joining us on WWT Research. I'm Rob Boyd. We'll see you again next time.
This episode is brought to you by Five9. Power more personalized interactions with real-time data to create extraordinary customer connections. Streamline the agent workflow experience with Five9 and revel in the results.